Hi guys, today I had the pleasure of sitting down with a dear friend of mine, Mr. William Probert. William is the co-founder of Zip Limited. They are a corporate secretarial and business formation company here in Hong Kong, also with an office in Singapore. It was a great chat. We learned about his entrepreneurial journey. And for those people that are interested to set up a business here in Hong Kong or in Singapore, great insight. It was an absolute pleasure, and I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. Cheers. Will, it's fantastic to see you, buddy. How are you?
Mate, I'm very good. Very happy to be here.
Man, you know, for the audience members that I know, we've known each other since 2002. Before I met my missus. When did you start dating your missus?
Yeah, after that. Actually, no, it's a lie. I've been with her for 3 years by then. Yeah, she was 22 at the time.
You should know to the date, to the month, to the hour. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Now, for the audience members that don't know you, can you just introduce yourself and what you're doing and tell us a little bit about your setup at the moment?
Sure. My name's Will Probert. Born in the UK, but grew up in Hong Kong. Worked in the BVI for a little while. Been back in Hong Kong since 1999. Worked in a number of different industries. Recruitment, outsourcing, sort of offshore and fiduciary, and now running a corporate services business in Hong Kong called Zip.
Beautiful. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delve in and I want to talk about your entrepreneurial journey and really talk about Hong Kong, which you know I've always been in love with.
Yeah.
So to start with the beginning. So talk about where you grew up and you know how you moved to the BVI.
Well, I guess, yeah, initially came out to Hong Kong as a kid in the 70s. Old man was an engineer, so we moved out as a family with him. School here, which was great. University back in the UK. Came back to Hong Kong in 97 for the handover. And so, saw that, which was a very, important period in Hong Kong's history, obviously. And it was great to be part of that kind of on the ground in real time.
Amazing.
And then at that time, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I sort of had a bit of a loose end. And a mate of my old man's who was working in the BVI at the time said, what's Will up to? Your man's like, well, he's eating my food and being a waste of space. He says, do you want to come to the BVI and, work for my trust company? So, nothing else going on. I said, sure, let's do it. It was initially supposed to be a 6-month contract. It was extended a couple of times. So I was there almost 1.5 years in the end. And started off in the corporate services and fiduciary industry.
I think that must have spoiled you. Imagine that as a first gig.
It was, yeah. It was my first proper job was, working. At the time, I was more in the kind of back office, working for the financial controller.
Yeah.
I was his assistant, basically. It's a very acquisitive industry in that, a couple of businesses have been bought and merged together at that time. And so my boss was trying to sort of, put the systems in place. And I was just, a glorified office boy, really. But it was great. It was kind of an introduction into that world. And it was nice being a sort of, a real expat, right, for a bit, as opposed to an expat, right?
Did you do a lot of traveling in the region when you were there? Where did you go to?
Mostly around other islands in the Caribbean. So there was one rugby team, one football team, one cricket team sort of thing. And so the rugby team toured around some of the islands in the Caribbean, went to the States a couple of times, which was great.
Where did you go in the Caribbean?
St. Martin to play rugby and for a couple of stags, Antigua to watch cricket, Barbados for rugby, Dominican Republic for rugby. Sort of here and there. It was great.
Yes, I've got so much in common because I spent a lot of time in the Caribbean when I was about 17, 18, mainly in Trinidad, Tobago, Grenada. I haven't been to all of the places.
But I did get down to Trinidad.
It's amazing, but Trinidad's it's a great place, but it's a scary place. There's a lot of violence. It's not a safe place, but it's a beautiful place. So then after that, you then came back to Hong Kong?
Yeah, so the Hong Kong office and the BVI office were obviously having a lot of... we were communicating all the time. Hong Kong was a massive sales office at that time, particularly selling BVI companies to Taiwan, to the Taiwanese who were investing heavily in China at that time. And they obviously couldn't invest directly. So we were selling, I would say, 150 companies a month probably back then.
Wow.
And so I came back to Hong Kong to, because this was sort of pre-cloud, right? This was in the late 90s. So, of course we had systems and the internet, but they didn't necessarily talk to each other. You had 2 databases with different information. So I was trying to, bridge the gap and fight the fight for the BVI in Hong Kong and then, do the same. Having had hands-on experience there, I was kind of a useful, facilitator and fixer.
Yeah.
And so that was, it was an interesting time. But when I got back, it was right in the middle of, actually towards the end of the .com boom.
Yeah.
and I had a couple of friends in recruitment who were absolutely raking in cash.
Smashing it.
And I was sort of not earning that much at the time, really enjoying what I was doing, but I was looking at kind of move more into the sales and BD side when I got back to Hong Kong.
Yeah.
So my first business trip was to Taiwan. I didn't speak Mandarin, so I started learning, and yeah, it was interesting. So I saw a lot of friends in recruitment. I thought, right, if they can do it,
yeah,
I can do it.
You know it. So what desk were you sat on? What was your first desk?
It was kind of quite generalist. It was at a small, quite aggressive headhunting shop.
Okay.
So
you did a bit of everything.
Bat phone, fake names, all of the bad old, the good old / bad old days of recruitment.
Man, I'll tell you what, using pseudonyms was something that most people just couldn't handle. And
yeah, so just, old school research. We had one computer at that time that had the internet on it. You had to book time on the internet to research the companies, try and find candidates.
Yeah.
And so that was great, playing, just phoning people up, cold calling, trying to get names, trying to get numbers. It was sort of fun. But after 6 months, I was like, look, this is really fun, but I suspect not the most ethical way to do business. So I only stayed there for 6 months.
And after that?
Moved to TMP.
Okay.
Which is now Hudson.
Right?
Yeah.
Did you do HR? Was that the desk you specialised in?
Yes. Started HR. So when I was at the company before that, I sort of did a few HR placements.
Okay.
Just because that's what fell. I was doing FMCG, so I was kind of doing sector recruitment. Just happened to be a few HR roles. So when I joined TMP, it was to be a specialist HR recruiter.
So was that your segue to Black Mountain?
Yeah.
How did that come about? I never asked you that, funny enough.
Yeah, so Black Mountain were a client of mine.
Same with me. Wow.
Yeah, so they were looking to hire, obviously, HR staff, and it was really small in those days. So do you remember Betty?
Yes.
So Black Mountain's first HR hire in Hong Kong, specifically to be an HR specialist. So I helped hire Betty, and a role came through for a sales guy for Black Mountain. And at that time, I actually really enjoying recruitment. It was good. Although at the same time, we'd gone through, after getting into recruitment, we went through the end of the dot-com boom, then we had 9/11, then we had SARS. So I was already, after only a few years, a little bit battered and bruised. And your income's quite variable, right? And there's not a lot, when the economy crashes, there's not much you can do about it.
I was born commission only, right? And then the worst thing is I had billed, money had come in, and I still didn't get paid. Scary times.
Well, yeah, exactly. So I was sort of thinking, actually, in industry, I was quite interested in HR at the time, having, spoken to, by that time, hundreds of HR professionals.
Yeah.
And so when the role came in for Black Mountain, I said, why don't we go out for lunch and discuss the role?
Did you go straight in? You didn't work on it? You put yourself forward straight away?
What's the statute of limitations?
We've passed them. But okay.
I put myself forward. I put myself forward. And
when did you start with them? In 2002, right?
3.
No, 3. Oh, did you? So I started on the 3rd of March, 2003.
Yeah, I think you were there just before me.
Oh, really?
In Singapore.
I thought you'd already started, because it was about that same time.
It was around 2003. I can't remember exactly the month, but we were very similar. You and I were both quite new at the same time, I think.
The thing, what I loved about our relationship and friendship, and the same with Tanya, was I've worked in a lot of firms, and I've since seen a lot of firms where you have two counterparts that are always in competition, and the bosses kind of encourage that. And I've never understood that, because I've always subscribed to a rising tide raises all ships. And we just got along from day one. We spoke every day on the phone, and it was, and Tanya was so helpful. But that, looking back, that was quite rare. You don't see that very often. Yeah,
I agree. Although, like you, I was used to being one of many salespeople in a kind of, not that it was the trading floor, but that kind of sales environment, and there's a lot of banter, there's a lot of energy.
Yeah.
And then you and I being the sole salespeople in quiet offices. If I didn't talk to you, I'd have gone crazy.
Yeah.
Because, you need that bit of...
Well, I was sat on my own for about a year and a half, literally on my own in the office, which was... Actually, I kind of liked it. It was a nice office. I was in the penthouse at Suntec, but it wasn't that glamorous. So I realized there's no way I can work on my own. I need that social interaction.
I'm the same.
Yeah. And what was interesting was, I remember the first time I physically met you, you probably won't remember, because I was flown to Hong Kong and I'd never been to Hong Kong. And I always wanted to come to Hong Kong. I was a massive Bruce Lee, Van Damme fan.
Yeah.
Seen all the Hong Kong flicks. And we had people fly in, I think it was from London, New York, Switzerland, Tokyo, Singapore.
Yeah.
And you were the leader on the sales board. You had done the most transactions, the most business. And I just asked you loads of questions. You helped a lot. And Tanya, again, she was brilliant.
Yeah.
So that was interesting. So our journeys are very similar in that sense. And then what happened after that then?
So let's think. So a few years at Black Mountain, which is actually great. I really enjoyed the experience. I learned a lot, actually.
By the way, we should say Black Mountain is an HR outsourcing firm. Biggest client was Credit Suisse. We did a lot of work globally with Credit Suisse.
Yeah.
I think in Singapore we had 10 people on site working at Credit Suisse alone. So it was pretty significant.
Yeah, I don't think we had that many in Hong Kong, but yeah, we had people full-time at Credit Suisse and a couple of other banks as well.
Great business. You worked directly with Graham. So you knew Graham before?
Yeah, I knew Graham through hockey, loosely. So we played for rival hockey clubs. So I kind of knew him a little bit socially, and we had a few kind of friends. And then I got to know him more as a client, and then obviously, as a boss in those days.
Yeah.
And it was really good. The only sort of, at that time, what I missed about recruitment was every day there was some positive interaction. You might get a good CV, or you might book a meeting, or you might get an interview, or do you know what I mean? There was something to keep you interested most days.
Yeah.
Whereas with outsourcing, particularly on the bigger deals, there could be a few weeks without anything happening.
Yeah.
And so for my sort of level of, patience.
Well, it's interesting because you and I worked maybe a slightly different angle, because I deductively worked out that we were paid 1% to 3% on the size of the fee. I had to go elephant hunting.
Yeah.
Right. And, that was it. And then I realized the thing is, if you chase really big deals, they lead to RFPs that could become global. And then the problem is, let's say it ends up in London, your colleague in London will end up front running it if the company's headquartered there. So then I kind of kept changing my structure. But what you were doing, you were putting runs on the board, you were finding smaller deals and closing those deals.
Yes.
So it was a balance of both, right?
Yeah, 100%. What was it? Hunt whales, but don't ignore the penguins.
Yeah, great saying. Well, the other interesting thing was, at that point in my career, I don't know if you can speak to this, but I found that I was just turning up every day, and I realized that wasn't working. I had to learn how to become an expert in sales. And I'll tell you a funny story. So Daniel West, I met him on my first day. It was Monday, the 3rd of the 3rd of the 3rd. And I spoke to him, and I said, because he was moving to New York.
Yeah.
Right, and he had done a fantastic job in the region. And I said, look, do you mind if I ask you a bunch of questions and I record everything? I'll get it transcribed. And he spoke for about 2.5 hours, wealth of knowledge, wrote it down. And I got the front desk at serviced office to transcribe the whole thing. And I thought I could just ask them to do that, but they charged $2,500 for doing it. And I said, I want it color coded. So when he talks about Zurich, put it in pink, Tokyo in this color, Hong Kong in this color.
Is it very demanding at all?
Yeah, you know me. And then Graham got the bill and goes, well, that's this. And I told him. And then he said, and I actually genuinely didn't know. I just thought that was part of the service of a serviced office. I'd never been in one before. And then I just said, look, just take it out of my salary. Don't worry about it. It's going to help me. And because I said that, he said, no, it's okay, but just think twice about that. So I said, what about the bill that I went out to clients out last night for a champagne dinner? I was just winding him up. But anyway, going back to the point, and I remember speaking to you and to Tanya and Graham, and I said, look, what sales books can I read? And that was the journey of me doing a lot of self-development. But it took me until that time to really start doing it. What about you? Have you always done a lot of training development in developing your sales skills, or was just you naturally great networker?
I have to say, we did some interesting courses when I was at Hudson.
Oh, really?
There was one course in particular that always sticks with me called Integrity Selling, which I always found quite amusing with a recruitment background. But, it was essentially how to put the person you're speaking to in a pigeonhole. And then based on what pigeonhole they're in, you treat them differently. So they had, doers, talkers, plodders, controllers. And then there were different buying signals that they would give you. Talkers want to be your friends. Controllers want you to do things exactly in the steps that they say. Things like that. Doers don't want any chit-chat, just straight down to it. Little things like that. Understand who you're dealing with and then adapt your style to what they want, rather than going, this is how I sell.
Yeah.
And, and then good luck with that. And while, some of it was a bit cheesy, but it was quite interesting. It's kind of, don't treat others how you want to be treated. Treat others how they want to be treated. Yeah. Which is sort of, I guess, the underlying message. And that was quite good. But I also, as I was sat there, I was thinking, well, that's just being human, isn't it? That's just, that's a natural thing that you would do. But actually not everyone.
No, for you and I, it's natural.
But the other interesting thing I learned was if you look at you and I, very similar but very different styles as well. You look at Graham, and what I learned is I devised this methodology kind of off the back of this, the art of selling without selling. You know, he just presents facts and goes through everything. But there was a lot of sense behind that, right? All right. So then after Black Mountain, where did your career go?
So I had a hankering to get back into recruitment. I was missing the sort of cut and thrust of that a little bit. Also, you know, while I didn't finish my degree, I studied law at university, had a lot of friends who were lawyers.
Why didn't you finish your degree? You having too good a time?
Let's see. The podcast answer is I didn't want to be a lawyer, and so I decided, right, I'm going to stop the degree, work out what I want to do, and then finish. That's the sort of the nutshell version. If I wasn't an idiot, I would have just finished the degree and then not been a lawyer.
Yeah.
Right. But as you know,
when did you stop after like second year?
Yeah.
Yeah. So interesting.
Yeah, and it was a silly decision at the time. Although having said that, it was part of the journey that led to where I am now. So I wouldn't take it away, but I wouldn't necessarily advise someone to drop out. Maybe change course, or I was doing French law with French and German.
Okay. And, where were you studying?
University of the West of England in Bristol.
Okay.
Shortly after it had moved from Bristol Poly into the West of England, so kind of early 90s. But we were studying in our second year French law in French, German law in German, and English law in English.
Wow.
And the law part I was fine, and the French was manageable. The German was a disaster, and I should have been honest with myself and said, actually, do you know what? I'm not going to put the work in that's going to get me through this.
Yeah.
So I should have just switched to straight law.
I think that's salient, because when I speak to a lot of people when I'm doing career coaching, it doesn't surprise me, but it does, that most people don't know where they want to go. So one of the questions I always ask people, what have you been earmarked for? And invariably the answer is, I don't know.
Yeah.
What do you want to do? What are your aspirations? And people kind of get a little bit stuck. And I think, I don't know about you, but like my mum and dad, I didn't even talk to them about which university. They really didn't give me any counsel. So I would imagine when you made that decision, you probably felt you couldn't. And we both got 3 kids, and I'd want them to come to me early, and talk to me about that.
Well, also, having been a recruiter, having met a lot of people, having given a lot of career coaching and advice over the years, I feel I can offer my kids quite a lot, whereas, mum, dad, the advice when they were in, school was do a vocational degree so that you can get a job. They're coming out of South Wales, right, out of coal mining communities.
Yeah.
You're not going to study philosophy, right? Yeah. Become a teacher, become an engineer, get a job. And so that was sort of a bit of the advice that they gave me. Yeah. But as soon as you tell your parents you want to be a lawyer, they're like, great, tick, that conversation over. I want to be a doctor, I want to be a lawyer, I want to do something that has an obvious career path. No more counsel, no, are you sure, or why? So with our kids, I think we'll if not challenge, if not tell them what they can and can't do, at least challenge them to sort of justify what they want to do and really make them think about it. Having said that, what they want to do at 16, 18, 25, 30.
It's going to change. It's going to evolve. And now the world's very different.
Well, yeah, the economy and the skills needed move so fast now that, so quickly that who knows what they're going to end up doing.
When did you think about becoming an entrepreneur? Because when I look back, right, I think it was very obvious you and I were destined to be entrepreneurs and go into business. I'm just curious, when did you start thinking about it?
So left Black Mountain, I joined a legal recruitment boutique called Legal Futures.
I remember that.
Which had spun out of Wall Street Associates, actually.
Damien.
Yeah.
Yeah. He offered me a job for it, funny enough. He's a very dynamic guy.
Yeah, no, I had a lot of respect for Damien, actually.
Yeah.
And one of the things I
forgot he'd worked there.
Yeah. When I joined, they had a training course, which was sort of, learning how law firms operate, what the different, areas of law were, what a day in the life of a particular lawyer might look like, some of the documents, so that when you're talking to candidates, you can speak their language, right?
Brilliant.
And so you'd have a vague idea of what they were doing, and they wouldn't let you anywhere near a candidate or a client until you had a certain level of understanding. Of course, it was superficial compared to an actual lawyer. We're not becoming experts, but you knew enough to sort of, talk to them in their own language. And then also learn about the hierarchies of the firms. I quite liked that in terms of...
Doing practice law?
Yeah. I ended up specializing in private practice. And, I found it incredibly interesting. But from recruitment, if you're working in an outsourcing company, it's hard to think to yourself, I want to be an entrepreneur and set up my own outsourcing business.
Yeah.
there's, a few barriers to entry there. You need a little bit of infrastructure, and no one's going to outsource to a one-man band.
Yeah.
Whereas in recruitment, once you've built your name, your reputation, you have a client list, you've got candidates.
Yeah.
The barrier to entry for recruitment is actually, quite low.
Yeah.
Which is why we're like, why there's so many kind of boutique recruiters. So that was kind of gave me the idea. But what really tipped into the balance was in the financial crisis. So towards the end of 2008, I'm looking into 2009 going, there's going to be zero recruitment or very little recruitment. So I just thought to myself, I can earn 100% of nothing or 40% of nothing. And it was, I thought to myself, right, I'm going to set up, build my pipeline of candidates, get my, service agreements in place. And then when the market comes back, I'll be ready to go.
Rock and roll, yeah.
And so it was quite a sort of opportunistic but strategic decision at the same time. So I kind of always wanted to do my own thing, and I've always worked in small environments, Hudson being, an exception. And there were some advantages of that, but I'm not that interested in the greasy pole. I don't like losing arguments at work. I want to sort of...
You're complementary, anyway, the way you work.
Yeah, but I kind of want to do what I want to do. And if it doesn't work, then I'll change. If it works, great.
Yeah.
I don't want to be told to do something unless I've, really believe that it's going to work, and I can, see from the person that's giving me the advice that it has worked for them.
Yeah.
So anyway, so I thought, so recruitment, and then got into that.
Don't you find it interesting though? Because I feel that you and I were never fully understood or maybe valued, because if I had a young guy like you or me back then working with me, I'd immediately bring them close into the business and say, look, this is what your future could look like. You could be an owner in the business, got a lot of potential. I want to develop that potential. But it's, because I'm just amazed, because when you come across people like that are driven, ambitious, work hard, entrepreneurial, right? You give them the ball and let them run with it. So I just find that mind, because I never had a boss that saw my talent and believed in me. And you know what? I'm grateful actually, because it led to me setting my own business, and early.
Yeah.
So there is a flip side, right? There's a positive as well.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I think I've had some bosses that I really respected and learned from, and I've also learned from terrible bosses.
Yeah,
you're right. You can learn how not to do things right. It's also quite important. So, and what was interesting when I was running the recruitment business, which is how I got back into corporate services. A really good friend of mine who is in Australia introduced me to someone who was looking to build out a corporate services business in, this part of the world, Hong Kong, China. And so he came to me as a recruiter, can you help me staff the business up? And we were chatting, and he was like, well, actually, you've already got a bit of infrastructure. You've worked in the industry before. You know what we want. Why don't we do the business together? We'll hire someone for ourselves. We'll form a company and we'll do it. And I remember thinking, so it wasn't my idea to get back into corporate services, but again, an opportunity came along, and actually we just recently had set up another recruitment company to leverage off our infrastructure. So we'd gone through that business setup process, solving the problem, you know what I mean? And so I'd already started bringing other companies to Hong Kong, and Hong Kong is an easy place to do business. As you know, we can obviously talk about that later.
Yeah.
And so we thought, right, so went into corporate services. So me and my business partner and him and his business partner, we shook hands and we set up the corporate services business back in 2010.
Okay.
And then, got back in the game, which I'm still in now.
You know what's interesting is I can't remember when you and I found out that you and Neil Bullock were very good friends and you lived together in Discovery Bay in B, because, Neil was the first guy that I met in Singapore, and it baffled me that you guys had been great friends for years and neighbours, and I only found out about it, I think, after he left Hong Kong, which was a real shame, because we would have had some good nights out. You know what I mean?
Shows how often we're on Facebook.
It's just crazy, right? Absolutely crazy. So tell us about your current business. What was the idea behind the name, and tell us about what you guys are doing.
Sure. So I guess so with the first corporate business we set up, which was Astor's Corporate Services, we ended up selling that in 2015 to Amicorp.
Okay.
Then I worked with Sovereign Trust for a few years, which is like a big international trust company.
Yeah. So full circle back to the trust business.
Yeah. And
Wow.
then, again, sort of, looking at the market and, Sovereign was a great place to work. I really enjoyed it. And they were but they were moving more into sort of asset management, wealth management, pensions. They weren't dealing as much with the sort of the entrepreneurial market in Hong Kong and, new businesses. It was for more established, it was kind of, had a different client profile than I was used to working with and, preferred to work with. So I thought, right, I wanted to go back out on my own again. And I was speaking to someone who I met back in Mountain Days, Stephen Barnes, who's from the Hong Kong Visa Centre. And he and I had always done a lot of work together. He does the immigration specialist bringing to Hong Kong. He's the Hong Kong visa geezer.
Okay.
There's about 10,000 videos out there for anyone who wants to go and check them out.
Okay.
And so he was like, look, we need to build something together. And I was like, yeah, I agree. And he used to spread the immigration work around to different corporate service providers and then looking to get referrals back on the immigration side. But between us, we generate a lot of work ourselves. And he goes, look, why don't we just put it all under, one umbrella, keep it all in-house. So we shook hands and set Zip up. He'd already, come up with the name. It was kind of what he called, it's like an idea virus. It sort of sticks in the mind. It was close to Xero, which is accounting software. So Zip sort of sounds a little bit similar.
Yeah.
If you're looking for it on Google, you start typing Zs in and it should pop up if you've heard the name.
Yeah.
So I'm like, sure, but I was unsure about it at the time. But I kind of like the name now because it is a bit different. It does, it does stick in the mind, right? Which is,
sure.
Which is good. 4 Zs, 3's too few, 5's too many.
I was going to ask you, how did you do it? How did it? Because
4 is the perfect amount.
That's it. Yeah, that's it.
And so we ended up, building it together. And actually with Astus, we built a mediocre business in a great market. It was a good business, but it was sort of, my first time building a corporate services business from scratch. We made a few mistakes. We had a couple of, high highs and some low lows, but learned a lot from that. And so building Zip, I'm like, right, I can use the experience that I've gained and really build it. So I feel that we've built a great business in terms of our service offering, infrastructure. But, we got our license right before the protests kicked off in 2019. Then we had COVID, then, geopolitical uncertainty.
Yeah.
The trade war with, China and the West and all of that sort of stuff. So it's been a challenging time to build the business.
For sure.
But, I would say we've out incorporated, I don't know, a high percentage of the market. Who knows what that is?
Yeah.
But anecdotally talking to, friends and contacts in the space, from a new business point of view, we've been doing, very well.
Well, for me, right, I've always loved Hong Kong. I believe in Hong Kong and I feel, that's why I'm here, right? Tell us what you've seen about, the resurgence of Hong Kong, because it feels like things are on the up again, right?
Yes, I would say, we're not in a bull market. We can't pretend that we are. However, we're definitely on the road to recovery. Hong Kong is coming back from an economic point of view. All the reasons that made Hong Kong a great place to do business or have made it a great place to do business historically, all are still in play, all still exist, from, the tax environment and the treaty network, availability of talent, the ease of setting up and doing business. I think we've just been voted the freest economy in the world again. Signs of life in terms of family offices and coming back to Hong Kong. And now that the biggest problem in COVID, honestly speaking, was the 21-day quarantine. Hong Kong, you just couldn't travel here.
Yeah.
And so people, and Hong Kong being such an important regional hub, global hub, people just found other routes and, found other markets. And Hong Kong, while we're open for business again, not everyone has come back yet, but they're starting to.
Yeah.
Particularly from the Middle East, particularly from, some people are starting to come back from Singapore. I don't think it's a mass, influx, but definitely a few people are.
So you off camera, you were saying you were starting to get some interest and referrals from Dubai, for example, to set up here, right?
Yeah. So, Dubai, is a great place to go and do business, a great place to live. It's attracting a lot of attention at the moment internationally. Let's say you're a Brit at the moment who's looking to, build your career overseas.
Yeah.
Hong Kong is struggling to be heard among the noise, right, that Dubai is creating as a destination.
Yeah.
But once you're there, once you've set up, You've got corporate taxes starting to come in. It's actually not that cheap place to live, to do business. While the tax might not be high, there's plenty of licenses, and there's a lot of friction in terms of doing business.
Yeah.
With the amount of people that have moved there in recent years from all over the world, that's obviously putting pressure on, housing and financial services, banking.
Yeah.
Banks are under a lot of scrutiny there at the moment for obvious reasons. So if you're an entrepreneur in Dubai and you want to set up your second or third, a lot of entrepreneurs have got more than one thing cooking at the same time.
Yeah.
If you set up a business in Hong Kong from Dubai and you're running it from Dubai, it's not taxable in Hong Kong under the territory-based tax system. It's also not taxable in Dubai, because as I understand it, the UAE doesn't care what you're doing outside of Dubai.
Yeah.
So you can actually set up quite tax-effective international business from here, from the base. And a lot of people are, starting to realize that. And as Saudi and China get closer together, Dubai and Hong Kong being the gateways to those markets are starting to do a lot more together. Hong Kong's investing heavily and marketing itself aggressively in the Middle East.
Yeah, it's interesting. So when, if you break down the demographic of the majority of your clients, the majority of them would be entrepreneurs setting up, right? Would you say?
I would say the majority are Hong Kong-based entrepreneurs.
Okay.
Either setting up another business or setting up their first business. So, you might work for a consultancy, one of the big four, and then you decided to go out on your own. So we'll get people already here looking to set up their first venture. We get a lot of clients who move to Hong Kong in order to set up. So we'll sort out the immigration side of things for them as well. And of course, we'll look after the Hong Kong office of an international business. So their first employee in Hong Kong. We'll set up the infrastructure for them to enable them to, give them a bit of, corporate infrastructure. But I would say, the majority of clients are Hong Kong-based entrepreneurs and businesses.
What are some of the recurring trends when you meet entrepreneurs or people that are starting that quest? What are the things you see? Okay, this guy's got it, she's got it.
Oh, that's an interesting question.
So I'm sure it varies tremendously, right?
I tell you what, I do occasionally meet people and I think, this person's going to go far. And I guess that's from recruitment as well. When you're recruiting for a job and a candidate walks in and you're like, they've got the job.
Bang.
I'm done. Search over. You just know it. And the client's going to know it and you just know. So occasionally I meet entrepreneurs like that as well. And even if the business that we help them set up doesn't work, I know that they're going to go again, that they will be successful.
Yeah.
And actually I'd have to think about it a bit more. There must be sort of common traits. For the moment, it's just a kind of a gut feel. But I would say people who are very passionate about what they're doing. Do you know what I mean? And they have a huge belief in themselves and what they are going to offer, what they're going to offer in the market. And they might have already tested the waters. So they might have been running a side hustle that then becomes more interesting. I'll tell you what was interesting during COVID, actually. Hong Kong is a great town for side hustles. It's very easy to set up a company, register yourself as a sole trader, get a bank account sorted out and just get trading.
Yeah.
So it might be sourcing things from China or, could be small things like, selling arts and crafts in a market but a lot of people in COVID when they were working from home actually spent a lot of time on their side hustle.
Yeah.
So we incorporated a lot of businesses and they're like, well, this used to be a side hustle, but now I'm making a lot of money and it's all going through my personal account.
Yeah.
And I haven't set up a company. But I said, okay, we'll help you sort that out. So
the interesting thing is you're uniquely placed that you've got this Rolodex and this network of all these dynamic individuals. Have you ever found a way to I'm sure you connect a lot of people knowing you.
Yes. So as I tell people when we're setting up, look, if you come across a problem you're trying to solve, whatever it might be, doing business in Hong Kong, talk to us. We'll either have the answer or we'll know someone who has the answer. We'll have seen that something similar or the same situation in the past and we can leverage that experience with people. And every now and again, we'll just connect again with my old recruiter brain, just matching people together.
Yeah.
So I have actually thought about formalizing that a little bit with having a sort of like an alumni network of clients and just a way, like a marketplace of ideas and sharing.
Well, think about this, right? So your wife's an artist and let's just say you've got Neil who's trying to come and bring his gin or his whiskey brand and he wants to do an event tasting evening and she wants to put her art decoration up and, the person, owns the warehouse, you could become Mr. Facilitator.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about lessons in entrepreneurialism, because it's not an easy road. There's a reason why I've got no hair, right? I always tell my wife it's because of her nagging, but but share some of the lessons that you've learned along the way.
Good and bad. I think one lesson I've learned the hard way is, be very careful about the people you get into business with. And then as a follow-on from that, make sure what you do as an entrepreneur is well documented. So we'll help people. What's interesting, people setting up their second business will do it very differently from the way they set up their first business.
Interesting.
Right. So one thing would be, people don't want to spend money on lawyers at the beginning.
Yeah.
Because, they've got a budget, they're trying to bootstrap it, but lawyers at the end of a business are a lot more expensive than lawyers at the beginning. Right.
Interesting.
So how you structure things, where you might want to exit, looking at jurisdictions, where should you set up, where should you, expand?
Yeah.
Overcomplicated tax-driven structures just don't really work. If you want to pay less tax, then move to a low tax jurisdiction.
Yeah.
Whether it's the business or yourself or both. Do you know what I mean? So just
Great
kind
advice.
of, so structuring, but sensible structuring. I would also say trying to raise money and build the business at the same time is very difficult.
Yeah.
Very difficult. Sometimes it might be the only option, but if you have the ability to get the funding in place first before you start spending the money, that's, it sounds like a no-brainer, but actually most entrepreneurs just go and they'll solve problems on the way, including, I need money.
Yeah. But it consumes a lot of business owners' times, that the raising of the funds.
It's a full-time job.
Yeah.
It's very hard to, it's very hard to run a business and raise money for business at the same time. Almost impossible.
That's the interesting thing, because I've always been self-funded, and I'm cognizant of that. It's a strength and a weakness. It means I'll never be filthy rich, right? There's a Donald Trump saying, not that I'm a fan, but if you owe the bank $1 million, you're in trouble. But if you owe the bank 100 million, they're in trouble. So it is interesting. And then what lessons would you share with guys that are thinking of going into business for themselves? What else would you suggest that they think about?
Well, of course, it depends on the industry and the specific things. But what I would say is, do your planning early. One of our clients who's been incredibly successful did a huge amount of homework before, leaving their safe kind of employment, leaving your paycheck behind.
Yeah.
So what I would say is, start when you're ready. Look, sometimes, there's a gap in the market, and if you don't fill it in 3 weeks, your opportunity is gone. Fine. Sometimes you just need to go.
Yeah.
And if you've got nothing to lose, let's say you're 23 and you've got this great idea and you don't need much money to do it, fine. If you're a father or a wife, if you have children, you have people who depend on you, it's a big decision to leave a stable income behind and go off and set up on your own. So make sure, I would say, you have the financial ability to survive what will always be longer than you think to get going.
Well, the other thing is, I think people don't realize, even if they run a company, when it's your money, everything's different. You have 5 people in a room in a meeting, and as the owner of the company, you're thinking, this meeting's just cost me $10,000, and we were chatting shit for an hour. No, we need to crack on. You know what I mean? It's a game changer, and handling that pressure is not easy. How is it with you and your wife both been entrepreneurs? Because that in itself must not be an easy journey to navigate, especially with 3 kids.
Yeah, we're always busy.
Yeah.
There's always something going on.
Yeah.
And but in COVID it was fine actually, because both our businesses were doing okay. Because of there was opportunities that COVID presented, as well as the kind of avenues that it closed down.
Yeah.
But we've always kind of made it work. I mean, Elle's been an entrepreneur since she was 22. So going back to when we met, she just set up her business. Yeah. So she set up an art school when she was 22.
Amazing.
Hong Kong. When she was 24, she'd been in Hong Kong for a couple of years, and
she's on a retreat now in Chiang Mai. Tell us about that.
So it's the Uma retreat she runs with a friend of hers, Ruth, who does Pilates.
Okay.
So it's like a lifestyle and wellness sort of retreat, but with an art and Pilates flavor to it.
Amazing.
So people come back after a few days, just in a good place.
Yeah, I think my wife would like that. Well, I will have to hook that up. Talk a little bit about navigating the regulatory framework here, because I know that the regulatory side of things in Hong Kong and in Singapore, it keeps evolving. You have to stay on top of it.
Yeah, I mean, we help clients with that. One thing that I'll just start with is, if you're looking to come to Hong Kong and set up a business, and that particular business does need a license, the default position of all of the government departments in Hong Kong I've ever dealt with is to say yes, right? Which is a good place to start. Now, occasionally, some of the requirements they have, some of the boxes that need to be ticked, seem pointless and ridiculous. But if you just say, look, tick the box, move on, get the piece of paper, crack on. So I would say, because of that, it's a good place to deal with the regulators.
Yeah.
So we'll help. We have clients who need either recruitment and employment agency licenses, import-export licenses. We deal with money lending and also money service operators, both of which are quite important in fintechs. Once you get into the sort of really meaty things like, SFC licenses for hedge funds and things, we work with a network of partners on that, because, that's a whole area of specialization that, we understand from 20,000 feet and can help facilitate, but it's not something that we can do. Okay. But we have a lot of financial services clients that are licensed and regulated, and we help with the, from the setup all the way through with our, regulatory partners and law firms that help.
How because we both come from an outsourcing background, how integral and important do you think outsourcing is in today's businesses, especially with startups?
You generally start with a small team, whether it's just you, 2, 3, 4, whatever it is. You can't be an expert in everything.
Yeah.
And I would say the entrepreneur or the business owner, the manager, needs to focus on what they're good at.
Yeah.
What makes money. There's no point having a lot of strong weaknesses. Right? Outsource everything that is not core to your business. And then, in the growth cycle of any business, you outsource, you bring it back in, you outsource it again. That, there's different triggers that make it more sensible to have someone in-house or not. So I'd say it's hugely important. So we'll help a lot with, things like payroll and accounting, the immigration side.
Yeah.
We do general, business administration as well. What was interesting, again, going back to COVID, was a lot of owners leaving Hong Kong for longer periods, and not necessarily having a good 2IC to look after things. So we would step in. So we'll manage bank accounts for people, so we'll be that senior employee who has the keys, and we'll kind of manage that.
Wow. You're really fully involved, right? When you look at the business climate in Hong Kong, I think there's a lot of myths I'd like to just cover and get them debunked.
Sure.
Because you said this brilliantly, Hong Kong's open for business.
Yeah.
Right. Do you feel that coming back into Hong Kong now makes absolute sense? And what's your take on things right now, climate here?
Yeah, it's a great question. Hong Kong is open for business. All of the reasons that Hong Kong has historically been good for business are still in place. Yeah, we touched on it earlier. There's the biggest, I guess, threat to Hong Kong at the moment is, kind of the Western media and the Western press. Hardly anybody can write an article about China without then saying, ooh, and Hong Kong. And there's a feeling that, that it's not the economy it once was. It's not the place it once was. And I would just say that's boots when you're here actually on the ground. That's not true at all.
Yeah.
Hong Kong is still very much open for business. And a lot of people who are coming here for the first time, setting up businesses, the young generation coming through, are super, super enthusiastic.
Yeah.
As we were talking about before off camera, the grumpy old grey-haired people who remember it was, better in my day.
Yeah.
There might have been better in my day for me.
Yeah.
But it's fantastic now for people who are, at that stage in their careers. So I think, and also once that kind of critical mass in terms of the, demographics, once that changes, I think there'll be a real buzz. You'll feel it again. Hong Kong doesn't quite have the same buzz on the street that it used to have. I think that's fair to say.
For sure.
But it is coming back.
Do you know how I knew Hong Kong had changed? Is when I'd come back for the first time after COVID, the taxi drivers were polite to me.
Wow. Well, you won the lottery there.
Like, what's going on here? You know what I mean? Is this the same place? But listen, I'm so enamored with the place. If I hadn't married a Singaporean lady, I would have moved here for sure. And I was telling you that my son turns 18 at the end of November.
Yeah.
The kids have never been, so we're all coming here, and they're really excited. And I've never been here for a holiday, right? So that my problem is actually narrowing down which restaurants and bars I want to take, my son to in particular. But I tell you what we're doing. I found a place that has a dirt bike track.
Oh, yes.
Have you heard of this place?
Yeah, my brother-in-law's been with his, and my sister, obviously, with their kids. They loved it.
Yeah, so like we've not got really any experience, but they've got ATVs for kids 6 and up, right? And we'll do some filming. And the other thing I said to my son, because he wants to become a filmmaker, I just said, look, you're not going to find another city in the world that has the unique places that Hong Kong has. Right, you just walk down a side street and think, wow, that could be an epic place to film something. Do you know what I mean? Let's talk about Hong Kong as a recruitment hub, because, I've always felt the big ticket numbers are in Hong Kong. People earn good money. They've got some very dynamic individuals here. What are you seeing from a recruitment perspective in Hong Kong?
It's interesting. I think recruitment just generally is a little bit flat at the moment. But we actually have quite a lot of recruitment clients, and also quite a lot of recruitment tech clients.
Mm-hmm.
And that does seem to be a trend, right? The company, the big firms, the banks are trying to do a lot more themselves, utilize technology. So what I see in the recruitment clients that we have are, especially the more experienced recruiters, are getting more and more niche. I think the more specialized you are, the better. Yeah. Whereas back in the day, depending on the market, as a firm being a bit more general might pick up more roles, and there was a lot of talent around. I think now it's sort of it's tech or boutique seem to be where the recruiters of our kind of generation are heading towards.
Yeah, it is interesting, and I think the other thing is I always say to people, get on the ground. Like you can go out. It's same in Singapore, to be fair. You can go out for a night in Hong Kong, bump into 4 or 5 people that will completely change the course of your career, your business, right? You just got to go and engage, meet people, network.
Yeah, 100%. I'm kind of smiling.
Why are you smiling? Yeah.
Well, I'm smiling because that's how you and I used to do it.
Yeah.
Right. We'd just be out and about.
Old school.
Or through playing sport or kind of networking or just hanging out with people. You were just out and about in town. Now there's fewer people out and about, maybe a little bit, because the younger generation is sort of a little bit more healthy than we are.
Yeah.
And because of social media, they're not interacting so much.
Yeah. Good points.
But actually getting the sort of the 20-year-olds and the 30-year-olds to just go out and network.
Yeah.
And meet people face to face. Get on the phone rather than sort of email and WhatsApping and what have you.
It's huge.
They're missing a huge trick.
I'll tell you a funny story. So when I first moved to Singapore, I worked on the legal desk and I knew nothing about it. And I didn't know what in-house practice was, nothing. I was 22 and I met a candidate and I said, look, do you have any forums where they get together? Mm-hmm. And he said, look, we've got this in-house group, people that meet up once a quarter. And actually there's one this Friday. But you're not allowed. I said, why am I not allowed? Well, you're not a lawyer, you don't work in-house. I said, where is it? And it was in Molly Malone's and Bow Key. So I go up there, I bring my 2 boxes of name cards. I've got 250 name cards and I gave them all out. And I was asked to leave after about an hour and a half by the general counsel from FedEx. And he said, look, I appreciate your gusto, Paul, but you can't be here. And I said, well, let me just finish my pint. And I just said, can you give me the list of everyone? And he goes, if it gets rid of you, yeah, now F off. And I said, I'll call you on Monday. So I did. And he was really, really nice guy. And he said, look, actually, a buddy of mine who's general counsel at UPS is looking for a head of tax. And I said, okay, cool. He goes, have you covered that type of work before? I said, absolutely not. He goes, well, just a heads up. Typically, a US firm will be looking for a tax lawyer, right? But here in Asia, we're looking for tax accountants. So if you can find someone with legal and accounting qualifications, that would be great. So I started thinking, and I put, I didn't even know what headhunting was. I was fresh on the ground in Singapore. And I very quickly worked out that they couldn't afford to pay top dollar. I didn't want to pay top dollar. So I found a guy in Malaysia that worked for Arthur Andersen, David Stone. I remember his name. And then I got him relocated here, and it was brilliant. And I remember he wanted CPF. I had to, during the meeting, I had to go out, call the office manager. What is CPF? And then I structured the deal. But it was, who does that? Who goes out, 2 weeks into their job, 2 weeks into moving to Singapore, goes out, gives it to, and I called every single person on that list. Hey, it's great to meet you. Boom, 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 boom. You need to be on the ground and doing those things, right?
No, 100%. You need to be here. But as you say, just, call lists, just getting names and just bashing through them.
Yeah.
Old, stockbroker style. I mean, there's still definitely a place for that.
I used to have an internal thing where if you got a name list, you would get a Brucey bonus. And one of my top guys, he came back with UBS's list of 10,500 people. He goes, well, he brokered the deal. He goes, if I got this list and it had 10,500 people on it, what would I get? And I can't tell you on camera what I gave him as an answer, but he got a nice bonus from it.
Yeah, sorry, just a quick one on lists. My favorite sort of list that I got was for big FMCG company.
Yeah.
I sort of found someone on their website that was like an executive. So I phoned up the office in Singapore as their regional hub, and I was like, look, I'm doing a little roadshow around Asia. I'm meeting people, can you, if I need the names and the phone numbers and stuff, can you send me your internal, directory?
Yeah.
I said I was staying at, who was it, Marriott? I might be making up. I think wherever it was, Marriott, Conrad, whatever.
Yeah.
And I said, look, I'm staying here. Can you kind of fax it to the business center? That'd be really helpful. So fax, right? Tell you how long ago.
Yeah. What a brilliant one.
And anyway, so I told our receptionist, right, this was in the first place, we had like a bat phone for headhunting, which was a different company name. It was terrible. I mean, but anyway, she said, right, you have to answer this phone for the next however many days as Marriott Business Center. So she did, she answered it, and it came through, and they faxed me their internal phone directory straight to our recruitment firm. The sad thing was there was only about 9 names on it, and none of them were useful, which was a shame. But I just remember,
still,
it was just like,
that's amazing. That is amazing. I've always admired you for being a great networker, business developer, sales guy. What do you feel are some of the key traits that you have and that you think other great salespeople have?
Well, I guess, there's, for me, from a networking point of view and from a longevity point of view, I think the key is, from a long-lasting relationship, you don't chase the quick win or the quick deal. So, you might make more sales if you're sort of, hammering it, do anything to close that deal. From a recruitment point of view, overcoming objections, just close them, get them to sign, get the client to hire, push it through. But actually, sometimes if it's not a fit, then don't force it.
Yeah.
And actually, you might lose that placement, or it might take longer, but actually the relationship that you have with the people that you give genuine advice to, even if it, might cost you a deal, that relationship becomes a lot stronger and lasts for a lot longer. And also, if you treat people with integrity and respect, and if you're honest and people trust you, even if you might not do something directly with them, you'll get referrals over the years and additional business that more than makes up for whatever it was that cost you at the time. So I think, plan to be in a market for a long time. You might not be, right? People move around. But if you plan to be there a long time, then it's your name, it's your reputation.
100%.
So you've got to, I think, take that view. And then, in time, it definitely, pays off.
Well, the thing about you and I, we're not transactional. Everything's long-term.
Yeah.
Most of our clients are lifetime clients.
Yeah.
Interesting enough, Isaac and I had a dinner with a banker last night, a private banker, and we were talking about sales techniques, and he was grilling me a little bit. How would you do this? How would you do this? And I said, I'm not going to give you all my trade secrets, but I'll give you a little bit of a masterclass now. You can pay for the rest. He was very kind enough to pay for dinner. It was an expensive dinner as well. But the waiter came, and I was thinking of ordering a bone-in ribeye and then a regular ribeye, right? And he said, actually, I think that's a little bit too much. I think if you just get the bone-in ribeye, it's a pretty big piece. And then if you get a couple of starters, boom, 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 boom. So, you know what? That's great. We'll go with that. And then the banker said to me, what's your take on that? He's just lost the deal. He's just lost this much money. I said, well, not really, because we've spent that much money on a couple of starters, but now we've got, a 3-course meal as opposed to, one massive steak and a smaller steak. And he was spot on, because we were stuffed at the end of it. But I said, more importantly, you know that guy had integrity. We're going to come back to the restaurant again. And to top it off, he came and bought some shots. To be fair, they were black labeled, so I didn't touch it. Because I didn't want to stock it going into today's podcast. But again, that's transparency.
Yeah, but also, he's going to get a bigger tip.
100%.
Right. So from himself, from a personal point of view, he's done it right. And then as branding for the restaurant, they're not trying to shaft you and stick you with one big bill. They want you to come back.
Yeah.
That's a perfect example.
What was the name of the restaurant? Carbone, was it? I think it was Carbone's.
Here. Black Sheep, yeah.
Black Sheep, was it?
Black Sheep Group. They're actually really good to be there.
Really good steak.
Yeah.
Great restaurant. Let's talk a little bit about networking, because you're a great networker. I prefer one-on-one, right? I prefer small, intimate sessions, but you've always also been great at networking. How do you go about doing that?
If you meet regularly with the same group of people or the similar group of people over a long period of time, you build a relationship that lasts for a long time, and also they kind of know you, they understand you, and again, they sort of trust you. So, it could be through playing hockey or sailing or a lodge, or I'm the chairman of the SME committee for the British Chamber. I've been on that committee for 8 years.
Good man.
And there's a core of us that have been there sort of, for that length of time. And the more you meet with people, book club, it doesn't matter what it is.
Yeah.
You just get to know each other. They know what you do. And then you get a lot of referrals from that.
Yeah.
And you can join sort of groups specifically for networking, specifically for business. But I think you just need to be out and about.
And how important, because for me, referrals are the key, because if someone vouches for you, I think 40% of the placements we've ever placed have been through referrals.
Yeah.
And, once you've built a great name and a reputation, a lot of your clients refer to you, right? Or the CEO asks you to meet, the CEO in Hong Kong. You've been vouched for. So referrals, that's a big part of your business, right?
Yeah, huge. I would say 70% of our clients are referrals.
Yeah.
If I was starting out, because I'm not just starting out now, right? It's been more than 20 years working in this town and kind of building your own, personal brand and network. And so you get it's huge for referrals. If you treat people, like I said before, with integrity and respect, and you're generous with your time, initially to sort of, help people solve problems, then it comes back to you.
It's funny, without mentioning names, I met someone very, very senior the other day, in a private bank, the head of the bank, and he's a good friend of yours. And he asked you about me, and you said, yeah, Paul's an absolute twat. You should definitely work with him. So, but these things work well. Talk to me about, when, raising 3 kids, you can speak to this. I find each of my kids are very different. They're unique. But as they get older, because you've got a 16-year-old, 14-year-old,
and 11.
If they want to go down this entrepreneurial route, would you say to them, finish university first? Have you and Elle talked about, okay, well, maybe you go into entrepreneurialism later on, or maybe straight out of the gate? I'm just curious, have you had that discussion, or you think, what would you do?
So Arthur, my middle son, is definitely quite entrepreneurial. He's very inquisitive. He's asking lots of questions about it. He's trying to understand how the world works, money, he'll look at crypto, random thing, he'll see something and he really wants to find out. So I suspect at some point we'll have to have, a chat with him. Olive, my daughter, who's oldest, is kind of looking at, she's flitting between education or sort of performing arts, drama, English. She's quite creative. So we'll see what happens there. But I would say finish your degree. I've been in 2 minds about university education recently in terms of, do you need it or not? It doesn't have the same value as it used to. If everyone's got a degree, is it special anymore? I was talking to a good friend and a client about it, and she was saying, well, look, whether you use your degree or not and whether you learn anything that's specifically helpful, it's a ticket to global mobility. If you're looking to move countries, having a degree is just one of those boxes you need to tick.
Yes.
So even if it's purely for that reason, and certain degrees are fantastic, a good degree at a good university can really set you up just in terms of your critical thinking and all those sorts of things. So I would say, yes, get a degree, and then get out into the real world and see what you want to do. Try different things, try different jobs. If you have a passion, go for that initially and see how that works out. But if they had an idea, they're like, hey, I see an opportunity, there's an idea, and if you sanity check it and it looks all right, say, all right, what, give it a go.
Yeah.
Sensibly. But I would also say, look, side hustle.
Yeah.
As long as you're not competing with your employer, right, and breaching your employment agreement, right, then test it out.
Yeah, for sure.
You don't have to go, quit everything and go, full on straight away. So I would say side hustle first, see how it works out, test the market.
Yeah. And I think what's so important is when you're young, if you get the opportunity to live, work, study abroad, it's huge because it changes, it shapes your view of the world. Because, you and I were international, but I know so many guys that I grew up with in the UK, I actually think they would have loved living abroad. It never happened. And before you know it, you're 40, married with 3 kids, and it's very unlikely to happen. So I'm telling my kids, go early. That's why I'm bringing them to Hong Kong. I want them to see as many different places as possible and meet as many. So what I'm doing now, interesting enough, is I'm trying to get clients and candidates that I get along very well with. When I'm meeting them, instead of going out for dinner, I'll have them over. And I want my kids to meet them. And because they have exposure to very senior people. And actually, the kids are a testament to me. If I'm, I didn't mean this, but I had a couple of clients over recently, and they said, look, we know all we need to know about you because we've just seen your relationship with your kids and your son in particular, because he sat and joined us. And I almost started crying at the end of it because that was not the goal. That wasn't the intention. Do you know what I mean? It was brilliant.
Well, no, just on that, when I came over to yours recently, when I was down in Sing, same thing. Like kids were,
we all had dinner together.
Yeah. Super polite, super respectful, curious. I was really, really impressed, actually.
Thanks, man. That's kind of. So rapid fire fun questions, buddy. What's the first thing that you do in the morning that you can tell us about?
So that I don't walk around like an old man, I need to stretch out my ankles.
Yes.
So they just
hockey injuries.
Yeah, they just buggered from sport, and essentially, I kind of walking on hot coals if I don't do that. So sadly, I have to move my ankles around.
But you're an early riser. You've always been, right? You get up pretty early.
I'm not as early as Elle and the kids at the moment because they're up and out for school, so they're sort of up before me. But I'm out of bed before 7 most mornings. But in our house, that's already a bit late.
If you weren't in your current industry, what would you be doing?
That's a really interesting question. I think from the skills like you and I have talked about, from what we have in terms of, negotiating, relationship building, deal closing, in a different world, sort of broking, but maybe more high value things. So like shipbroking, commodities, something like that. Same exact skill set that I have and that things higher value doing, but just bigger deals and more cash.
That it's
something I enjoy that's more lucrative, right? If I'm thinking about it in those terms,
Well, talking about that friend of yours, if you look at Zigd and Zags, and that guy's rise has really been meteoric. What's your favorite place to unwind in Hong Kong that is off the beaten track?
Anything on the water, right? So whether it's sailing, on a junk.
Oh, by the way, when you video called me the other day, or I video called you.
I was on a junk, yeah.
And it was like, what am I doing stuck in the office and you're out there?
Yeah, Friday wine club day junk. That was great.
Jeez.
And that left from Central, but actually we ended up in Middle Island, which is the yacht club's facility in between Repulse Bay and Deepwater Bay.
Yeah.
And Middle Island is my sort of happy place in Hong Kong.
Oh, is it?
I absolutely love it. Elle and I got married there.
I didn't know.
Yeah.
Is Repulse Bay a place where you can do like jet skiing and?
I don't know if you can hire off the beach, but if boats go there, like if a junk's there and have a jet ski, then it does happen. But I'm not sure you can rent them off the beach. You need a license in Hong Kong for jet skis, which goes back to a case involving my little sister back in the day.
Wow.
She was almost run over by a jet ski, sort of swimming near our junk.
Okay.
And there are a couple of court cases that came out of that.
I bet.
One involving my old man and the guy who was driving the jet ski, and one involving the guy just was.
It's got to be sanctioned, otherwise you're going to have loads of crazy people on beers out.
So you don't see that many jet skis in Hong Kong, right? Like you do in other parts of Asia. That's partly.
What about like wakeboarding and stuff like that?
Yeah, wakeboarding, absolutely. Yeah, Deepwater Bay and Repulse Bay.
You can book it.
Yeah.
What's the weather like at the end of November? Is it going to be?
Oh yeah, you're thinking of a trip, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, should be.
Should be, yeah.
Thin wetsuit, but even then you're probably all right. Once you're in, it's okay.
What's the best book or podcast that you've read or listened to recently? The Quintessential Questions podcast. You got to watch that John Dykes one, man. You're going to love that.
Yeah, no, I'm keen. Podcasts, I watch snippets of quite a lot.
Yeah.
You know, the longer they go on, the harder it is to sort of sit through the whole thing. I like trigonometry. I like Rogan. You know, the rugby pod is one of my favorites. It kind of depends. So I'll sort of dip in and out of it.
Yeah.
Like sort of 25 minutes twice a day on the ferry. Okay. It's my sort of, you know, podcast time. So I really enjoy that. Yeah.
Books?
I'm in a book club and we read a lot of interesting things, mix of fiction, non-fiction, you know, different authors.
Who's your favorite author? You have one?
Probably George MacDonald Fraser, who wrote Flashman books.
By the way, I am a future author.
Are you?
Yes.
Tell us about that.
I've got to write under a pseudonym because I can't self-incriminate, you know, but I've started writing things.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. But one of the book I read recently, which I really enjoyed, and it's on TV and Netflix, was A Three-Body Problem.
Oh, yeah.
Sci-fi. The book was great. I haven't read it was such an original take on things. So I love kind of old school sci-fi.
Do the kids like reading?
Yeah, Olive reads.
Oh, well done.
At least.
Oh, wow.
Arthur's...
He's prolific.
You know, Olive reads is an absolute bookworm. Arthur reads. Oscar, it's like, you know, it's torture for everyone trying to make it. For him.
Yes.
He'll get there.
If you could have dinner, past or present, with any entrepreneur, who would it be with?
Probably Elon, I would say. Just fascinating. Yeah. Now, whether he'd be a great dinner conversationalist is a whole other thing, but in terms of, I think he just fascinates me.
Yeah, he's on another level. I'd have him, but I'd go with Richard Branson.
Do you know what? That's my 100% second choice.
Yeah.
When I thinking about it, but for like a chat and dinner, right? You get like a house on fire because he has an island in BVI, Necker Island.
Yeah.
And so when I lived there, my flatmate used to go out with Roz, who ran Necker Island.
Really?
Yeah.
You know,
I never got a chance to go. I was like so close.
It's so funny because I think people. You know, all the guys who work for me, I've got 131 books in the company library, and I always struggle reading because I'm dyslexic. But so, for example, a lot of people know of Richard Branson, but if you've not read his...
So our generation, I read, that was the first book I read from an entrepreneur, with specifically like a business book almost.
Well, think about how he went about viewing islands. He had no money, and he basically said, I run Virgin Records, you know, and next thing he was on a private helicopter checking out all these islands. And he didn't have 2 pennies to rub together, you know, and then I remember reading how he brokered the deal with Janet Jackson and then Phil Collins. Remember that story? So he got into a taxi. Phil Collins was driving the taxi and said, listen, I've recently just done a demo. Can you have a little listen? And Richard Branson said, yeah, sure. And he goes, well, look, you'll have to come back to my flat, but my mum will make you breakfast. And Phil Collins was in a council flat, put on the cassette tape whilst he was having his full English, and that's how he signed Phil Collins. Mad, isn't it? Favorite Hong Kong street food?
Very easy, curried fish balls.
Really?
Yeah. Okay. Ever since I was a kid, absolutely loved them.
Love it. Favorite restaurant in Hong Kong right now today?
It's really boring, but probably the Compass Room at the Yacht Club.
Okay. Is it good, yeah?
Yeah, it's not the best food, it's not the most expensive, it's not the cheapest. I would say it's some of the best value, but it's also quite old school, which I like.
Yeah, I like old.
You know, like dessert trolley.
I love
that kind of thing. You know, it's just if whatever wine you order, they've got the right glass. It's little things.
Yeah. What's the one tool or app that you can't do without for business?
For us as a business, Xero, the online accounting software. So we're platinum partners, and it's a huge part of our business and the service offering we have. So in terms of, for me, I don't know, actually, I kind of flit around. I think, but for the business, definitely Xero.
Any hidden gems or one hidden gem in Hong Kong that you would tell visitors about that they may not be familiar with?
Again, it's got to be linked to the water. Maybe Po Toi, the island. It's a restaurant on Potoy.
Really?
You can get a commercial ferry from Aberdeen, an old sort of like an old school ferry.
Potoi?
Potoi.
Okay, I'll check that out.
It's really cool, and also because it starts off right in Aberdeen Harbour, so you go out through Aberdeen Harbour, which is quite interesting in itself, where the Jumbo used to be.
Yeah.
Before it accidentally sank.
You remember the aeroplanes flying in? Were you here?
Into Kai Tak, yeah, absolutely.
What was that like?
Amazing. What was interesting, you when you get back to Hong Kong, let's say summer back in the UK, land, and you quite often would, get off on the runway.
I know what you're going to say.
Picked up the smell.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the very, very distinct old fragrant harbour smell back in the day.
I thought you were going to say when you were arriving in, you could see into people's.
Oh no, you could. No, you absolutely could.
And and it was hot and sticky.
Well, no, you could see the Superman, logos on people's pants hanging out to dry. They're washing, right? I mean, it was. You could see, you'd recognize faces if you knew someone and see them in the window. You'd 100% see them.
Brilliant. Most memorable destination that you've traveled to for business?
That's interesting. I've been to sort of, the usual sort of generic-y cities, but I've been going to Dubai quite a lot recently. I enjoy visiting it. I could live there, but I'd much rather live here. But there's such a real buzz there at the moment. It's really interesting, and it's kind of the population's really diverse, but in a different way to Asia. Yeah. So I'm sort of walking around Asia. I'm like, I know where people are from. I know what the languages that they're speaking. Whereas I go to Dubai and I'm like, I've got no idea. Yeah. It's fascinating.
It's a new world.
Yeah. What country? What language is that? What country you from? What's your ethnicity? So I find it really interesting. But also, each trip I've been on has been hugely important for our business. Every time I go, I'll pick up a new client or clients. That's a new introducer. And there's so much synergy building now between Dubai and Hong Kong. So it's not necessarily the most memorable as a destination, although I don't dislike it or anything. But it's probably the place I should go more to or to go to.
Mate, listen. I was there, and one morning, 2 mornings I had meetings, and what were we up to this morning? I said, well, I was out on a boat, going around the harbour, and my meeting was at 8:30. You did that already. I showed video, and we don't really do those things if you live here. And the next morning I did a skydive, and it was like, you've got to make the most of it. So what I try to do when I'm in Singapore is try and live like a tourist, which is not easy, right? We're all guilty of that when we live somewhere. How would you describe yourself, Mr. William Probert, in 3 words? No swearing.
Okay, I'll have to stick to then. Fun, honest, and determined.
I'll give you a 4th one, loyal. Yeah, 100%. Will, it's been an absolute pleasure. Anything else you want to cover?
No, I think we're good. It's been really enjoyable, mate.
Really enjoyed it. Thanks so much. I appreciate it. Cheers.
Yeah, cheers.